Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to Unacademy. Welcome to today's The Hindu newspaper analysis, where we take a look at the Delhi edition of today's The Hindu newspaper, single out and pick out the articles relevant for your examination, be it for the prelims or the mains examination, discuss the basis of it and the important concepts associated with it, and in the meanwhile, in the process, we shall also be discussing how to write answers from the questions which can be asked from that particular area. If you like this initiative of ours, please don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button. Having said that, after this particular session, I do encourage you to visit our Telegram channel and then attempt the multiple choice questions which have been framed from this particular topic so that you are in practice of those MCQs as well and sharpen your focus for the prelims preparation. The link will be provided in the description below. Now, before we take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today, an announcement with regards to the special program that we have brought for the aspirants, where we are providing the complete course and the complete package with regards to the civil services preparation, including one-on-one mentoring, doubt resolving by the educators in the session itself, detailed sessions adhering to the syllabus by the various different educators, and mains test series with evaluation, lectures with PPT at a very affordable price. So do use the code IAS English and do avail the maximum discount that you can and be a part of the journey for civil services examination. Now taking a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today. So today, all the topics that we are going to discuss are from the Delhi edition of the newspaper. So the first topic is regulatory reform stuck in the loop in Health Ministry. This is associated with the portion of GS paper 3. It talks about the aspect with regards to that why we need to have better regulatory mechanism when it comes to the drugs and the pharmaceutical industry. We are going to discuss what are the issues that are faced. Next census should be the last enumeration based one. Now, the census exercise is being conducted. This is with regards to whether the process by which we are carrying out the census, that should be followed, or should we follow the trend followed by other countries. So this is relevant again for your GS2 and GS3. Then, taking TB seriously, this is about the government and the health ministry adopting the WHO prescribed standard for treating the drug-resistant TB and why that is helpful, why that new regime is helpful and what is that new regime. So this is a follow-up to the previous editorial piece and relevant for your GS paper 3. Then on the challenges to road safety in India, the predicament of road safety and why still we have significant amount of casualties occurring on our roads. That is something that we are going to discuss, relevant again for your GS paper 2, GS3. Then the role of district agro-met officers in supporting the farmers, relevant for the agriculture paper in GS paper 3. Now, there is another important article with regards to the GST, and the GST Council has met and has agreed upon deliberating some of the reforms with regards to GST on healthcare and the other aspects associated with the progress made by the GST Council. We are not going to cover that topic in the portion of the CNA. For that particular topic, we are going to come up with a special video today itself. So do watch the YouTube page and the YouTube channel IAS English, and we will come out with a detailed video with regards to those changes for GST on healthcare. Okay. Now, few of the topics relevant only for the prelims perspective. India UAE Inc. Pact for Civil Nuclear Cooperation. 2 anti-submarine warfare vessels have been inducted in the Indian Navy, and MSMEs face fresh headwinds on new machine safety norms, how they can impact the MSMEs. So these are the topics that we are going to discuss today, starting with the first topic of the day, which has appeared in the editorial section, and that is regulatory reform stuck in a loop in Health Ministry. Now, what this article pertains to, or what is the backdrop of this article? So basically, this article talks about the fact that the Drug Controller General of India, or DGCI, has actually come out with the guidelines for certain parameters. So what are those guidelines? So there have been guidelines by DGCI, and DGCI actually, the Drug Controller General of India, actually operates under the aegis of, it is DCGI, not DGCI, it is DCGI, Drug Controller General of India. Controller General of India. Now, under Health Ministry, under the aegis of Health Ministry. So basically, DCGI has come up with certain guidelines. What are those guidelines about? So there are 3 different guidelines issued. So let us understand what those guidelines are about. The first guideline which has been is about the recall guidelines. What do we mean by that? Let's suppose I am an organization, I am a pharmaceutical company, and I have come up with a new medicine or a new drug. Now that is being circulated in the market and people are consuming it. Now after some time it has been found out that there are certain discrepancies, there are certain inefficiencies within the drug, or maybe there are certain side effects which have not been monitored and which have not been accounted for while introducing the drug. So in that case, the drugs and all those medicines being circulated need to be recalled from the entirety of the market. So that is about the recall guidelines. Recall guidelines. We will talk about what are the problem with the recall guidelines also. Then secondly, when we talk about the pharmaceutical sector and the drugs being distributed, you see there are lakhs of such retail shops, or in the sense medicine shops across the country where the drugs need to be supplied to. Now, India is a tropical country. India is a humid country. So the conditions are quite ideal for quick decomposition and destruction of the properties of the drugs. Because if there is a slightest amount of exposure to, let's say, a very high temperature condition or so on, the drugs themselves can go bad, and there not only the efficacy will go down, but it can also render in certain unwanted side effects. So the distribution practices, that needs to be at par with the WHO recommended guidelines. So that is where you have guideline for good distribution practices. Now this is very important for a country like India. This good distribution practices, this is also something that we will refer to as GDP for the remainder portion of the discussion. Then the third guideline which has been issued is pertaining to the similar names being used by pharmaceutical industry. For example, let's suppose you consume any particular medicine by a renowned organization or a renowned company. Now simultaneously there is another small company which has come up. Now they take the same name as the renowned company. Now in that case what will happen? For example, let's suppose, on a very generic and a simple example, let's suppose we all know about the drug paracetamol. Now paracetamol is consumed, it is a formula after all. Now paracetamol is consumed for purposes pertaining to fever and so on. Now another company comes up, a local company, a small company has come up where they have not spent that much time in research, practices, etc. Now they come up with a tablet and they name it as paracetamol. Then what will happen? People will tend to buy that. But the risk involved in that case are very high. So that is why always advisable that you should have some amount of differentiation, and the same name should not be taken by certain companies. Right? It is like I start a shoe company today and I name my shoe company as Adidas. Now that in itself will be a kind of misleading advertisement to the individual people or the retailers, where people will think that this is the same branded shoe as the Adidas, but it is not. So that is where the usage of the same name, similar. Now guidelines have been issued for these different areas and these different perspectives. And you see, all of these are very important in the so-called pharmacy of the world. After all, India is referred to as the pharmacy of the world. And given the fact that we have the largest population, the amount of drug consumption and usage is also significantly very high. So, monitoring and adhering to the control norms in which the drugs are actually marketed, the drugs are then supplied, and whether it is effective or not is very important. Yesterday also we had discussed that when it comes to healthcare, the out-of-pocket expenditure is significantly high. So, that needs to reduce. So, there faulty drugs oftentimes exaggerate the problem. Now, you see, what were the problems with each one of them, pertaining to which the guideline has been issued by DCGI. So, the first problem was associated with the recall guidelines. Now, let's suppose you have come up with a faulty drug. Now, after some time, DCGI or the health ministry comes to know that this drug has got a lot of side effects. Now, it orders a recall. But under the previous norms, it could be the scenario that let's suppose from the region of Karnataka, you have been asked to withdraw the drugs or recall all the drugs that you have supplied in the state of Karnataka. The companies would do that. But at the same time, because of lack of clarity in the norms and the regulations, it would be the case that while the company is withdrawing and recalling the drugs from Karnataka, it is freely distributing and easily able to circulate that in the market in maybe the adjoining region of Andhra Pradesh or Maharashtra. That means the recall guidelines were not clear with regards to the absolute ban on usage, absolute ban on circulation, and so on. So, that is where you needed a very stringent recall guideline, and that has slightly been taken care of. Now, the guideline for GDP or good distribution practices, as I told you, that when it comes to vaccines, when it comes to various different drugs, that is where it has been a long time issue of the pharmaceutical industry that the distribution network, the logistics network, that needs to be upgraded or maintained upon a certain standard. For example, you need to have the cold storage vans and the refrigerated transportations, cold storage depots and logistic networks. So, that should be facilitated. It has been found out in multiple different raids by the health ministry that various different the marketers and the shop owners, they are circulating vaccines which have passed their efficacy owing to the storage, owing to the kind of storage that they are subjected to. Many of the medicines you would have seen that it is explicitly mentioned that store it in a cool and dry place, and you store it in a 45 degrees Celsius outside temperature, then obviously there will be some reaction. And please understand that this is not a new issue which has emerged. This issue has been observed prior and for a long time across the various different standing committees, and in fact, it has also been brought to the doorsteps of the Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court issued an observation with regards to this way back in 1974. In 1974, in a very famous judgment with regards to Swantraj and others versus State of Maharashtra. In that particular judgment or observation, Supreme Court did urge the government to come up with good distribution practices. That why don't we have these good distribution practices? After all, what comprises of the good distribution practice? Is it that individuals should be good enough? No, it is about ensuring that at each and every parameter, at each and every node of that transportation, proper standardized mechanism and standardized operating procedure are followed or not. WHO does roll out a certain set of guidelines with regards to the distribution practices which should be maintained. So, if WHO is prescribing this, then why is it that we are not implementing it? Is it the case that the government has never been aware about it? Obviously not. If the Supreme Court has ordered and basically mentioned it almost around 40-50 years back, then you can think about it that this matter would have come to the government's cognizance multiple times. You see, you had the Parliamentary Standing Committee with regards to the drug regulation. That is the 59th PSC. Now, in its report, way back in 2012, it had flagged the issue. And in 2012, it was the Parliamentary Standing Committee had ordered or basically done a very scathing remark with regards to the ineptness or the inability of the Health Ministry to ensure good distribution practices. Owing to that, the Health Ministry was jolted into action. But as soon as the Health Ministry wanted to create a certain set of guidelines, immediately there was a lot of pushback from the Traders Association when it comes to the pharmacy industry. After all, the traders, the marketers, now for them to bring about certain changes in their logistic network, that would never ever be profitable. So that is something that they don't think about in a profitable manner. So that is where it was, again, due to that pushback, it was suspended. That issuing of regulation was suspended. And it again did not come forward. So like that, there have been multiple back and forth discussion with regards to the good distribution practices. The government has tried to come up with the norms time and again, and always there has been a significant pushback. Then the usage of the same or similar name. Now this is on the borderline of malpractice. Now here also the matter came up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court in 2001, in the case Cadila Healthcare Limited, versus Cadila Pharmaceutical Limited. At that point also, Supreme Court basically observed that you cannot have the same names being used or the similar names cannot be used because it is a malpractice. It creates a false impression in the mind of the consumers. And the argument from the other side was that it is an end-use product and we are issuing that disclaimer in the medicines, in the packaging and the labeling. But then one also has to realize that the larger section of the population who are consuming these drugs, how many of them actually go through the labels of the medicines, and many of them actually when they enter into the shops for the pharmacy, whatever medicine is given to them, they take it and they simply consume it without thinking about the symptoms, the drawbacks, the side effects and so on. So the expectation that each and every individual, given the fact that the literacy rate in many parts of the country is still not very high, and forget about the literacy rate, here you need awareness about the formulations of the medicines. So that awareness is much lower in larger sections of the population. So in that case, this is something which needs to be taken care of. Now, this issue has again been flagged multiple times. Parliamentary Standing Committee has issued observations with regards to this. So what was the problem? The problem here has been that there have been guidelines issued, there have been recommendations. For example, upon multiple petitions which were given to the DCGI earlier, you had the Health Ministry coming up with a regulation that when issuing a trademark, the trademark should not be issued to similar names or the same names. But there a question arises. How many of these small companies actually go for filing the trademark? Tomorrow, if I want to make quick bucks and quick money out of it, why will I go to the trademark office to register the name? I can simply end up manufacturing a medicine with the name of Dolo, with the name of paracetamol, and end up making quick bucks, and then maybe establish a pharmaceutical industry to formalize all of it. But in the meanwhile, larger section of the population will already be impacted. So that is where these three are the major issues and the sticking points pertaining to which the guidelines have been given. Now, let us identify the larger issues behind it. Some has been articulated in the article as well. So what are the larger issues? The article has argued that, look, regardless of all these guidelines which have been issued, none of them have statutory backing. That is, none of them have the backing of any act by the Parliament or otherwise as well. There is no legal penalty associated with majority of them. So, lack of statutory backing, that is very important. Why? So, lack of statutory backing or legal backing. Now, you see, if let's suppose I have come up, or I am a drug manufacturer. Now, I bring out a medicine which is very harmful. It has been found out, for example, Indian drug makers have been in the news for the past couple of years for all the wrong reasons. If you look back at the news for the past couple of years, there have been various news stories about some faulty medicines supplied in Africa, thereby leading to the death of certain people, faulty medicines being detected in other areas of the planet as well, being supplied from India. Now, what it does, not only does it create a significant amount of issue because people are losing lives, but at the same time, it tarnishes the image of the entire industry. It paints the entire industry in a kind of a suspicious nature where all of them are flouting the norms and creating these spurious medicines to be supplied to the market. That is never good. But think about it. Let's suppose I have come up with a cough medicine. Now, that medicine I have not tested enough. I have flouted the guidelines. And then I have supplied it to the market. And then the market or the people who consume it, they suffer from some disease or they suffer from the vicious side effects associated. Now, in that case, should I not be penalized? Should there not be an incarceration, or let's suppose, should I not be jailed in that case? Absolutely yes. There has to be a stringent penalty associated with any of such kind of violations. But the lack of proper statutory or legal backing to these guidelines mean that even in the case of drug recall, there are hardly any criminal charges which can be pressed against the individuals who have marketed those drugs. So that is a big issue. Then, the delay in adoption of GDP. In adoption of good distribution practices. Now, time and again, the bucket has been rolled down the road in the sense that when it comes to take the decision, that decision is pushed forward. And under what name is it pushed forward, or under what excuse is it pushed forward? Whenever there is a pressure built upon the health ministry in order to issue the guidelines with regards to it, and this is largely raised by the civil society organizations and all of them, they come up with a thing that we are going to have a stakeholder consultation, that is the trading body, etc. And the trading body and the trading community with regards to pharmaceuticals, they are quite powerful. Now, they exert all the pressure associated in the book, and they basically push that decision that, okay, that decision will be taken 3 years down the line. After 3 years, when the public memory fades, again pushed down the road. So that is why there is a consistent procrastination and a delay associated with any of these particular guidelines being issued. Then after that, lack of accountability. Now this actually pertains to a larger malaise which exists in our bureaucracy, as has been indicated in the article. You see, the article argues that the people at the level of Joint Secretary and upwards who are responsible for taking these decisions in the Ministry of Health, they are after all IAS officers or officers from the All India Services. Now for them, this particular posting is simply one of those postings in their longer career. So they expect to remain in this position for 2 to 3 years and not more than that. And by that point of time, they eye some other plum post in other areas such as Home Ministry and so on. Now, in that scenario, there is not a significant amount of specialization that these individuals have with regards to what should be followed, what should be the standard practice, what are the malpractices being followed in the market. So they don't have much cognizance and they are not very tempted to take the decision immediately. So that is a major problem. That is why this article in the end also argues that you should have certain specialized people or people with specialized knowledge taking these decisions and at the helm of this decision making. Now that opens up the entire Pandora's box and the entire debate with regards to should you have technocrats or bureaucrats taking the shots, or rather should you have people who are well versed in that particular area of expertise in that sector of medicine, should they be taking the decisions, or should it be a generic IAS officer who has worked in multiple areas. Now there are pros and cons to both of this. That debate is everlasting and that debate has been going on in our country for decades now. But the end result of that, one has to understand that whether you bring specialized professionals through lateral entry or not, that can be a very unpopular decision. What can be done in the immediate short run is that the individual All India Service Officer or the IAS officer who is actually posted there, they need to have that accountability fixed on them. They are responsible for the lives of many millions of population. So they cannot have that lackadaisical attitude that, okay, these 2 to 3 years, I will just serve my posting and then move on to the next. And that accountability needs to be fixed. And when the matter is taken up to the courts, the judiciary also has to fix that responsibility and accountability to the level of secretary, joint secretary, and so on. Only then will the health ministry be spurred into action. Now, here the associated issue, the climatic conditions in India. This is basically the issue associated with good distribution practices, also lack of awareness amongst the population, in population. Right, due to which you need stringent regulation. So what is the way forward here? The way forward for each of these issues, you can easily craft a way forward. There needs to be a legal backing. Statutory or laws and acts of the parliament need to define that this borders a criminal offence or this is under the purview of a criminal offence where strong action needs to be taken. Then the good distribution practices need to be brought about. There will be pushback by the traders and the trading community, but that needs to be brought about. For example, here a leaf can be taken out of our way of dealing with the automobile sector. Now, you see, in the automobile sector, again, there was a lot of pushback from the automobile manufacturers when it came to the deployment of newer emission norms in the stage or in the Bharat Stage 6 engines. So, the industry body was very, very significantly opposed to the idea that from BS4, how come you are directly jumping to the BS6 emission norms? But the government at that point of time put its foot down that no, this needs to be done in order to fight the emissions, and look how the entire industry came on board eventually. So here, when you put forward those guidelines that look in our country, particularly owing to the climatic conditions, lot of population is at stake for consuming these faulty medicines. That is where the trading community and the traders association will eventually toe that line as well. And then accountability needs to be fixed. So for each of these issues that we have pointed out, that can be turned into a kind of way forward. So in this article, in detail, what have we discussed? The guidelines issued by DCGI. What are the guidelines associated with? What are the relevant Supreme Court judgments associated with that? What are the issues pertaining to that particular issue of or the area of drug supply? And then what can be the way forward? Okay. Now, moving on to the second article. The second article is based on the aspect of census. Now, census exercise in India has been carried out every 10 years. Now, this census exercise was scheduled to be carried out in 2021. But owing to the COVID pandemic, that entire census exercise has been delayed, and if media reports are to be believed, then the government is serious about carrying out the census exercise and initiating that exercise 2 to 3 months down the line. So, the census data is something which will be released maybe by 2026-27. Now, that is because that is a time-consuming process. Now you see, this census exercise, how is it done? You have people going door to door and actually counting the number of individuals in the family, the employment, what is their age group, literacy rate, everything is then basically enumerated. So it is an enumeration based census exercise. In the enumeration based census exercise, you actually go for counting each and every individual of the population. That is how you go for that exercise. Now, this is a costly endeavor. It has an expenditure worth thousands of crores. It is not something which is very cheap. So, and it is a time consuming process as well. You have to understand that who are these individuals who go to door in order to carry out this exercise. You have the government officials doing that. So, while the government officials are deployed on census duty, there is also a loss of number of man hours where they are actually working, which is their permanent job. So, that is where the cost is huge. So, that is where the author of this particular article has argued that we should go for a register based census exercise, which is carried out in the countries like UK, Austria, etc., in the Scandinavian countries like Finland and so on, because it is cheaper and there are other aspects also. We will talk about the difference between these two. What is register based exercise? But first of all, why is census important in a particular country? And why is census important in issues associated with governance? Is it the case that census is merely for counting the number of people? If that would have been the case, then we don't even need to carry out the census exercise. UN has already said that as per the UN reports, we have exceeded China's population and India is the most populous country. Should we be resting on that and gloating about that? No. Census exercise has got a deeper meaning. First of all, when it comes to administrative issues, governance issues, now what are the actions that you take? For example, let's suppose you find out that the literacy rate in a particular state is very low. Now, that will be the guideline for the next state government to bring forward certain schemes associated with improving the literacy. Let's suppose in a particular state it has been found out that the fertility rate has been very high, right? That is, the number of offsprings or the number of kids produced is very, very high. Then thereby there can be certain interventions brought by the state government there as well. Let's suppose similarly the census has found out that there is a large section of people who are unemployed and in a particular age group. So thereby you create or you find out that age division. So you make policies either for education. If the population of that state is very young, youthful, you make education policies there. If a population of a particular region, let's suppose they are in the working age group and they are unemployed, you create more Manrega days and you create more amount of funds to be channelized in that job creation. In a particular state, if there is a lot of migration which is happening, there also. So, for each and every step of the policy making, census is an important bulwark, is an important milestone which has to be taken care of. Now, the problem with this is that census is carried out, this census exercise is carried out every decade, that is every 10 years. So, let's suppose till now, by the way, all the schemes and the policies are still operating on the 2011 census. Now, think about it. This 2011 census actually captures the data around 2009-2010. And we are still dependent on those particular census data for all our policy mechanisms. You see, this example has also been cited by the article. For example, if you consider Delhi, in the southern part of Delhi, you have the region of Hauz Khas. Now, Hauz Khas is a quite affluent locality in Delhi and that has got significantly good infrastructure and that has got a significant high per capita income individuals living there as well. But as per the last census, the region of Hauz Khas has been designated as a rural settlement. Now, all the policies which you make for the urban development and the urban settlement, Now, naturally, when you frame the policy, you won't find individual discrepancies in each and every district. You go for uniform implementation that, okay, this smart city program will be applicable in all the urban settlements. Now, there, if Hoskas is a rural settlement, it can easily get omitted out of it. So, there are various drawbacks associated with this decadal census exercise, where you have a delay in terms of the data that is present. So that is where the argument has always been that should we go for a dynamic model, the dynamic mechanism for carrying out the population count. So the register based is actually a dynamic model. What do we mean by dynamic model? That it is not something that gets updated once every 10 years. It is something where you have regular updation of that data. For example, if you have to decide upon a policy measure in 2021 or let's suppose 2025, you should not be dependent on the census data 10 years back or 5 years back. You should have the accurate data of that year itself. So, let us understand what is the concept of enumeration based. So, enumeration based census exercise, it is time consuming, isn't it? Around 2 years of time is consumed, then very costly. Then other than that, it is also static data, that is becomes outdated very soon. Okay? Now, what is this register based dynamic model? So, for example, let's suppose you want to carry out the population count. What do? Rather than going home to home and asking how many people are there in your household, what is actually done in this, that you have the birth certificates or the birth records. Now, those birth records are automatically added to the population. Then, for example, you have the tax records. Then, for example, you have the residential records. So, basically, a correlation and assimilation of the data, whichever data is present in the government setup, including that from the tax authorities, the medical authorities regarding the birth rate, death rate, etc. This is consistently added and removed from that population chart. So, for example, any individual who is born, their names are automatically added to the census, right? Any individual who died, now upon issuance of death certificate, once that certificate is then uploaded, then automatically that name should be removed from that entire register. So, this is what is the dynamic based. Now, the benefits out of it, what are the benefits? Then we will take a look at the cons. Benefits. But before looking at the benefits, what the entire concept is. So, the basic concept is consistent addition, and removal of data based upon accumulation or correlation with the government records of different records by the government. That is tax authorities, housing records, medical authorities, all those records. Now, the benefits associated. It gives you a clearer picture with regards to the population. So, updated data. That will be much more beneficial for the policy making exercise. Then other benefit, it is very cheap. Cheap as in the amount of cost endured. So, it can be in certain cases 70 to 100 times cheaper as compared to the enumeration based, because here you do not need to deploy the manpower directly on the ground, and that in itself saves time and cost as well. So, time and cost saving exercise. cost saving, right? And here basically data available at any time. That is the updated data. These two can be linked into one. So this is the benefit. But India still carries out the enumeration based, whereas smaller countries which have been mentioned in the article, and the entire argument of the article has been that India should also shift to the register based, because countries like Austria, Finland, etc., they have gone on a register based mechanism. But you see, there are certain issues there also. India cannot directly switch to the register based mechanism. UK also made its intention clear that we will also go for the dynamic modeling or the register based mechanism for census exercise rather than going for the enumeration based exercise. Now, what are the issues that a country like India faces in that? Issues with dynamic count. Now, you also can think about it. If you are aware about the issues in India, first of all, in India in our country we don't have that detailed data framework. For example, in countries like UK, in countries of Scandinavian region, in countries of Europe, you also have the social security and so on. So any individual is always to be found in multiple different platforms and data networks. But in a country like India, you don't have, every individual still doesn't have the Aadhaar card. And when it came to Aadhaar and the PAN and the date of birth to be interlinked, all of you would remember the amount of backlash that the government received because of that, because the idea was that the government is basically taking away your privacy. Right? The government is assimilating all the data records. I should have my own data record. So here there is a particular skepticism associated with enrolling or enumerating yourself in the official data. So we don't have that data. So major problem is lack of data for citizenry. Now, yes, you have the Aadhaar card. Now, Aadhaar card is still something where the framework, the digital infrastructure needs to be strengthened so significantly, because majority of or many of the people, they still have multiple Aadhaar cards in their name associated. Many people, they still don't have the PAN cards. So that is where, and there are various issues of fake Aadhaar card IDs being issued left, right and center. So that is a major problem with regards to the discrepancy in the existing data as well. So that needs to be sorted out first. Okay. So first of all is absolute lack of data, then discrepancy in existing data framework, data set. Then think about it, a population of close to around 1.4 billion. How many of them are taxpayers? Very few. How many of them, their names you will be able to find on medical records? How many of them will have property records associated with them? How many of them will have vehicles registered under their name? We are talking about very small section of population. So that would mean even the collation and the assimilation of data, which in itself will be humongous task for a large country like India. But at the end of it, even if you carry out that assimilation and collation of the data, still it would leave out large chunk of the population whose name does not figure out in any of these. So it will always reflect a false number of population to the larger public. So omission of a large set of population from official records. Okay. Then this can also be open to various infringements. For example, at any particular place, wherever you are talking about maintenance of data, automatic enrollment of birth certificate, automatic removal of the death certificates, etc., then that can always be open to manipulation. So wherever any particular exercise that you carry out where data is involved, always in the drawback you can write the data privacy and the manipulation of data is one of the major risks associated. So data privacy and manipulation. This is a major risk. Now, in that case, what should be the way forward? So see, this census exercise will be carried out in an enumeration based method. The next census exercise, let's suppose, is carried out in the next 5 to 7 years or 10 years maybe. Now, that time period should be utilized for building up a robust network for the data sets. And for that, you need an active participation by the state governments. Till now, you have multiple state governments who resist the enumeration and enrollment of citizenry for various data platforms. So that has to be changed into active cooperation. So that cooperation by the state government, it will take to be implemented on the ground level and to be adopted by everyone so that people are not missing out from the list. There is no wrong reportage out there. So that will take a good chunk of a couple of decades. So for that couple of decades, one should invest that particular time period in building out a robust network for the automatic addition and removal, because India has got that technical prowess. India has got that ability to deploy IT services for larger problem solving. So that has to be utilized. So way forward is utilizing the IT expertise or IT services. Then cooperation by the state government. By state government. Okay. Then after that, development of robust digital infrastructure, right? So these are some of the things which can be followed going ahead, so that even if it comes to cost saving, time saving, and because you have to understand that at the end of the entire discussion, our goal should be what? To get the updated data whenever the government requires, whenever the state or the central government requires. So eventually the end goal has to be the dynamic data modeling and the dynamic population enumeration. But then for that, a long homework is required, and these are the way forward to do that. So in this article, we have basically discussed what is that enumeration based census versus what is that register based census, the pros and the cons associated with each one of them. Register based census, while that is more dynamic and updated data, it will be better for policy making. But when it comes to implementation in India, there are certain areas which needs to be catered to. So what are the issues associated and what is the way forward? Okay. Now coming to the third article, and this is actually a follow-up to the already appearing multiple editorial pieces with regards to adoption of WHO guidelines for treatment of drug-resistant TB. Now, in India, India is one of those countries which has got extraordinary large amount of TB cases. Now, in India, we have already got close to around approximately about 25% of global TB burden is present in India. Now you see, TB is an infectious disease and there can be air-to-air transmission as well. And in many of the cases, this TB, or when you are impacted or infected by TB, it will not immediately synthesize itself in the form of symptoms. It can lie latent in your body for some time. It can start impacting your organs after maybe a latency period of few months, or even in certain cases, multiple different weeks. Now, in that process or in that time duration, you might end up spreading that TB knowingly, unknowingly, to a larger set of population as well. So that is why you have large amount of that TB spread. lakhs of people of the population, they are impacted by this. And also simultaneously, because of the way in which we consume medicines, because of the way in which antibiotics are not regulated, many of the cases of drug-resistant TB has also come to the fore. Significant amount of population associated with the drug-resistant TB has come to the fore. Now, what is that drug-resistant TB? So, for TB, generally, you have the medicines which are given, that is isoniazid and rifampicin. Okay, these are the drugs associated with TB. Now, because an individual has consumed so much amount of antibiotics already, or maybe has got infected by a drug-resistant TB strain itself, many of the individuals are showing resistance to these particular drugs, or these medicines are not active anymore. So, for them, or they are not solving the purpose anymore. So, for them, there is a special regimen which is to be followed. And in that special regimen, the norms which would be followed in our country would be that for a long duration of 18 to 20 months, the individuals would be subjected to various different prescription drugs, and many of the cases you would have to consume multiple such tablets in one day for a continuous duration of 18 to 20 months. Now, when that is the condition that you have to follow, immediately what follows is a mental and a physical strain. And you also have to understand that significant larger number of population who is suffering from TB, many of them, they are employed in the daily wage sector. Now, for them, basically going to even seek the medical help to get those medicines, that in itself will mean loss of income for that day. So, many people end up ignoring those medicines. And even if you have the normal TB and not the drug-resistant TB, there also the drug regimen is and the medicine regimen is for so long that as soon as the immediate symptoms are taken care of, people abandon those medicines, as is a common practice, that you don't consume the entire set of medicines. Now, what that happens, or what that leads to, is that you have many such unidentified cases which roam around in the society, which are existent in the society, and it can lead to increased amount of further spread. Now, the problem is not only that, the problem is those of them who want to treat themselves, even there, the monitoring is very difficult. Monitoring individual cases for 20 months is a time-tasking process, is a cost-impacting process. So, the government machinery is also not that efficient in many of the cases, and people don't follow that also. So, WHO very recently came up with a new set of guidelines with regards to newer set of drugs, what is known as the BPALM mechanism. Now, BPALM or BPALM is basically the name associated with the drugs which are subjected for the drug-resistant TB cases. So, here in these cases, the new regime, there you have these drugs, that is bedaquiline, then pretomanid and linezolid and moxifloxacin. These are the drugs which are recommended, and rather than going for a regimen of 18 to 20 months, these drugs with reduced number of pills, that entire regimen is only for 6 months, making it easier to follow and easier to also adopt and monitor. So, this is much better as compared to the previous regimen, and this can add significant heft in our exercise of fighting TB cases. Now, you see, generally what happens, or generally what is the norm which India has followed, is when you have a global guideline issued for treating any particular disease, or global guideline regarding good practices, as we have just seen in the first article, India is very late to follow that trend. It is oftentimes there is a lag of a couple of decades in terms of when we start following that regimen. But in this particular case, the article notes that the government has shown increased agility and increased ability to come up with the drug and this new regimen. WHO has prescribed this new regimen quite recently, and the government adopting it Health Ministry officially adopting it, that is a welcome change. That is very beneficial with regards to the effectiveness of fighting the TB. Now, this is where the ground level execution also has to be carried out with greater efficacy. So, while this is a welcome step to adopt the WHO regime, but you also have to understand that when it comes to TB, India has been seriously taking the case of TB in our country and trying to reduce the load. You have various different schemes such as the Nikshay Mitras for better monitoring, for financial support, etc., which is there. And various different reports have also highlighted that between the year 2015 to 2022, the incidence of TB cases has reduced by 16%, which is massive, which is almost twice the rate anywhere across the globe. Yes, the numbers are high, but overall in that larger population, the aim to reduce that is also going to be a Herculean task. Then other than that, mortality due to TB in between this period has also reduced by a whopping 18%. So there has been that significant reduction in terms of, and this is something which has to be counted in achievement of our healthcare sector, where we are actually trying to overachieve our ambition. The global goal for the removal and the complete eradication of TB is 2030, and India has set itself a goal of 2025. Which obviously won't be something which will be achieved. But if you set a target of 2025, maybe by 2030, you will be able to completely eliminate or at least reduce the burden to a very minimal. Now, for that, there are various different government programs, and adoption of this new regime and new regimen by WHO is a very welcome step. Okay. Now, after that, moving on to the next article. Now, this is an article pertaining to the India Status Report on Road Safety. Now, this report is relevant. The name of the report, India Status Report on Road Safety. Road Safety 2024. This has been generated by TRIP Center at IIT Delhi. TRIP is basically Transportation Research and Injury Prevention Center. So, this specializes in ensuring and basically finding out that what is the reality with regards to the road accidents and how we can have better engineering, solve the problem of these road casualties and the deaths which occur on our Indian roads on a day-to-day basis. But this report further cements the existing fact that in India, road casualties are a major factor. We don't take that seriously. We don't take it as a larger problem, but then it is a problem nonetheless. If you compare it to anywhere across the world, you see, as compared to the Scandinavian countries, an average Indian is much more likely to get impacted or suffer a road accident. Almost 600 times much more likely is an Indian citizen to suffer a road accident as compared to the Scandinavian country. Imagine 600 times. Every year, we lose close to around 1 to 1.5 lakh people in our roads. Now, if you think about it, 1.5 lakh population being killed on the Indian roads annually. Think about it. All of us, we thought about COVID pandemic as the biggest disaster which has hit us in this century. But if you simply consider from the year 2000 to 2024, in the past couple of decades and a half, we would have lost 10 times more number of people in road accidents as compared to the number of people who were lost during COVID. While it is absolutely not fine to compare one disaster from the another, but this simply gives you the scale of the problem. the magnitude of the problem, that we are losing so many people. Now, majority of that population or large number of that population is the working age population, is the youthful population. So that loss is also a loss of human capital when it comes to India. Now, it has been found out that in certain states, the number of casualties and the number of accidents are much larger as compared to the other states. Here, the accidents are also significantly larger in the case of two-wheelers and motorbikes. That has also been found out. Now, that casualty is amongst the largest in the states such as Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh, Chandigarh, Delhi, Haryana, there you have large number of casualties, and the biggest victims or the people who suffer from it are from the two-wheelers segments, and the biggest causality is by the trucking industry and the trucks in general. So, here very briefly, let us talk about the issues pertaining to road safety. Now, this is where yesterday I had asked you to talk about the issues associated with healthcare sector in your region. Today I ask you to think about the issues why road safety is a far-fetched dream in our country and still we suffer a lot of casualty in our roads. But before that, let us point out certain issues. First of all, there is a general lack of awareness with regards to the traffic norms. People find it absolutely okay to come from the wrong side of the lane, and that lane discipline is something which is a far-fetched idea. So, complete lack of awareness. Lack of awareness. For road safety. Then after that, the other problem is that even the aspects, now lack of awareness also leads to it, but when it comes to, let's suppose, a simple safety mechanism such as wearing of helmets. In the two-wheelers, helmets are very essential. Just wearing of helmets could reduce the casualties by almost half, particularly in the two-wheeler segment. People don't wear helmets. And rather than worrying about it, many people flaunt it, that I did not wear a helmet, and you would be aware about it more than everyone else, that people generally the tendency is that, okay, I did not wear the helmet and nobody issued a challan as well. So, there is a kind of not only an impunity, but also a defying mechanism that I can defy the norms and still be okay. So, lack of adherence or safety measures adopted. Then other than that, you also have the issue, for example, that even the norms, for example, Motor Vehicles Act which was brought in, that Motor Vehicles Act had stringent mechanism with regards to that if an individual is found to be driving without license, then a fine of close to around 5,000 to 10,000 can be imposed. If, let's suppose, an individual is found to be driving under influence of alcohol, etc., then the license can be seized. Any individual found to be driving without a helmet, hefty penalty. Now, that had got a severe backlash from the citizenry. And recently you would have observed that there was a norm which was brought about that any individual, let's suppose, truck owner. Now, that truck, if it is found to be guilty and in violation which has caused an accident where an individual has lost the life, then there can be a fine imposed on the truck and there can be criminal case, which is the norm everywhere across the world. But when it was to be implemented in India, there was a large scale of protest and backlash by the trucking industry that we cannot be held accountable for the accidents. So, here, lack of stringent laws, very stringent laws needs to be brought about. Then, other than that, lack of implementation of those norms. So, first of all, the laws are not stringent enough, and secondly, they are not implemented, whatever norms are there. Then, there is also an issue with regards to the engineering of these roads. Now, when it comes to road engineering, or in the case, let's suppose, in many of the areas you would have found that there is the presence of these blind turns. Now, there needs to be enough amount of awareness and also signals quite significantly earlier from those blind turns that this is an accident prone zone. In many of the areas you would have seen those board signs etc. mentioned, but in many of the areas that is lacking. So, unnecessary installation of those blind turns, that can be avoided, and better road engineering can be come across so that those blind spots and those death zones in the roads, they can be eliminated. So, issue of road design and engineering, that is a major cause. Now, from here, by the way, questions have been asked in paper 1, GS paper 1 of the exam mains paper as well. So, road safety and that particular issue is always important. Then, another problem is that in our country, when you consider the entire length of roads, it is in lakhs of kilometers. Now, the national highways, which is around 2 lakh kilometer, national highways, they represent only around 2 to 3% of the entire road network of the country, and they end up handling close to around 40% of our traffic. So, imagine that only 2% of our road network handles 40% of the traffic, including all the heavy transportation. So, obviously, there will be overburdening, and there will be, due to that overburdening, more accidents which can occur. So, national highways, only 2% and handles more than 40% of traffic. So, that means what? More national highways, broadening of road network, etc. needs to be done. Other than that, you also have the fact that many of the states still do not have the data with regards to the road accident, that why that has happened. Any particular road accident will have a causative factor, maybe the weather condition, maybe the individual at fault. So, that data, if it is available, then you can have some curative measures as well. So, here lack of data, that is a major problem. Okay. So, here these are some of the few problems owing to which road safety is still a far-fetched dream in our country. So, what is it that we should do going ahead and in the way forward? Come up, first of all, with the proper implementation of norms. And for that, proper monitoring, digital challans need to be issued, follow up by the traffic police, and stringent punishment with regards to traffic violations, then greater safety awareness measures run by the NGOs, civil society organizations, by the state government. The state government should hire in certain consultants, and study should be carried out that where we are losing lives, because any life which is lost due to the unnecessary engineering or faulty road design. Now, in countries like US, the states are oftentimes dragged to litigation due to faulty road designs. In our country, that data itself is not available, that who has died because of the faulty road design. So, that transparency with the aspect of road safety needs to be brought about, and road safety should not only end up as a dinner conversation. It should actually be implemented and should be a part of the daily learning of the individuals, and that will only happen if we make this a norm and a common talking point amongst the stakeholders, that is the larger public and the government as well. Okay? So, these are some of the way forward that can be written. Now, taking a look at the question that can be framed from here, discuss the issue of road safety faced in India and suggest a way forward to solve the problems of rising casualties due to the road accidents. So, here in the introduction, what do you write? In the introduction, you directly attack the question here and you talk about the issue at hand. So, in the introduction, when you address the issue, you will address it in a very superficial manner. That is, road safety still accounts for significant amount of casualties, with around lakh to 1.5 lakh of people losing their lives every year. So, that is where you will give the data pointer as well. Now, If you have managed to finish it in one sentence, then the other sentence that you can write in the intro is the basic fact that this is a significant damage to the human capital and the demography of the country, because lot of the population or lot of the casualties are amongst the working age population, right? Now, after that, when you come to the body, then immediately talk about that the issue of road safety can be attributed to the certain reasons. So, in the body, talk about the reasons, first of all. Enumerate the reason, briefly describe. So, these reasons should be written in point sub-paragraph manner. Okay. Point and sub-paragraph manner. After that, talk about the way forward, that there can be certain steps which can be taken to resolve the issue. So, there you talk about the way forward. And after that, in the conclusion, that is when you basically talk about that how road safety is a big blot in our citizen care welfare, because not only are we losing the human capital, but at the same time, in India, where the number of vehicles coming ahead or in the given future that is going to rise, these road accidents, they can always end up impacting the family, the household, the society, and eventually the country in the long run. So, the need of the hour is to get rid of this problem by going to the grassroots of the problem and ensuring that India is a safe place not only to live, but also to commute. So, like that, you can end the answer. Okay? Now, the next article, the role of district agro-met offices in supporting farmers. So, basically, the Indian Meteorological Department is planning to operate and revive the district agro-meteorological units, what is referred to as the DAMUs, District Agro-Meteorological Unit. Now, these district agro-meteorological units, they were present earlier under the Krishi Vigyan Kendras. But then these DAMUs, they were shut down, they were closed. Why they were closed? And first of all, what was the purpose of them? What is it that they do? So, the name itself tells you, District Agro-Meteorological Unit. So, for every particular region, we know that India is a very large and diverse country, diverse in terms of even the physical parameters, climatic conditions, the amount of rainfall, etc. Now, a country which is largely agrarian, now in that particular country, in terms of the population, it is agrarian. You still have around 45% of the population which is involved in agriculture, hence agrarian. So, in a country where around significant population of 45% of the population is involved in agriculture, these individual farmers, they require or they need that weather update, that what is going to be the weather condition. Now, that is always going to be impactful in terms of ensuring that whether they should go for sowing, or whether they should protect the crop in terms of the event of excess rainfall and so on. So, it is very helpful for the farmers. And you have to understand, in a country where you have almost 86.7% of farmers are small or marginal, right? Small or marginal. Then around 50%, more than 50% of land is not irrigated. That is, they are dependent on rainfall for agriculture. So, you have rain-fed cultivation which is being carried out. So, you are dependent on natural phenomena. You are dependent on natural processes. Now, the Niti Aayog came up with the idea that, look, in these district agro-meteorological units, this is something which can be done by a computerized system. What do they do? Which can be done by a computer. So basically these demos, they end up generating the local weather report, local weather conditionalities, and they circulate it to the farmers of that region in local languages, and that message is communicated through multiple alert systems. Now that can be very useful and vital for ensuring that the right time of sowing is chosen, right time of harvesting is done, right crop protection is done. Because many of the farmers, they end up losing their crops owing to heat waves, large amount of rainfall, uneventful or untimely rainfall, and so on. So these weather alerts, they are very, very helpful and vital. But then what is the problem is that Niti Aayog said that why do you need people to do that? You can have the computer generated programs to release these alerts. But then the problem with the computer generated program is that computers, they only end up looking at the data, collating that data. But that data can tell you that 2 centimeter more rainfall will occur or 1 centimeter more rainfall will occur. The impact on crops, on certain kind of crops thereby, that is something for which you need the human intervention. It cannot be completely computerized as of now. The sending of the alert, etc., the customization of that alert message, for that again you need human intervention. So various different farming communities from different regions of the country, they had submitted their proposal and their argument to the Prime Minister and to the various different ministries. The Minister for Road Transport, Nitin Gadkari, had also supported the argument that these damos should be revived. So that is why under that aegis, these damos, they are being revived. Now the problem is also the fact that Niti Aayog had said that why should we have the government operating these district agro-meteorological units? We can have the private sector running it. But in India, private sector has got very limited reach in terms of weather forecasting. You have not more than 2 of these private sector agencies which go for weather forecasting, and even that is not very reliable as of now. But then the private sector, when it will come into that area, if I am a farmer, I want to receive information with regards to the weather condition and the climate in my region, and I deploy the help of the private sector. Private sector will not do it free of cost. They will charge me money. There are subscription models for the private sector agencies. Now, these subscription models, how they exist, in case you are not aware. Let's suppose I am growing a crop like sugarcane. I need the climate data or the weather forecast data. So that is where I will take the help of any private sector agency. Now that agency will require me to take a subscription of around 10,000 to 20,000 for a crop. So a farmer who grows 2 to 3 different crops, for them the annual expenditure can be around 30 to 40,000 just to get the weather data. Now this is not something that farmers can afford, given the fact that many of them are small and marginal. So when you have these district agro-meteorological units, they will be able to do it free of cost, and that too in the local language, which can be customized to that local population and the type of cropping pattern in that area. So that is where there is a lot of flexibility, welfareism associated, free of cost, and the farmers will be able to reduce the losses which are generally accrued due to unfavorable weather condition. Okay, so here the practice question. Discuss the relevance of these district agro-meteorological units in increasing the farm income. How do you answer this? This is a 10-marker shorter question. So here in the intro, you simply write about what are damos. So district agricultural agro-meteorological units are those nodal agencies which collate the data with regards to the weather forecasting and issue alerts and generate messages to the farming community for better preparedness. That is your introduction. In the introduction itself, you have told the evaluator that you know what they do. Then after that, leave the introduction alone, change the paragraph, come to the body. Now then, here the issue is farm income. So you talk about the fact, or you start the body by saying that in India, many of the farmers or significant amount of farm income loss is attributed to the let's suppose post-harvest losses, excessive rainfall, heat waves, etc. You list it out. And then you talk about the issues due to which the farmers lose their income, because majority of the farmers, they carry out rain-fed cultivation due to lack of irrigation practices and other faulty mechanisms. So, the reasons for loss of income. Then after that, talk about that how these DAMUs with their timely alerts can help the farmer fix the or reach the perfect timing for sowing, harvesting, crop protection, storage, the type of crop to be grown, etc. And that is something which can help in growth of farm income. In the conclusion here, you have to write about that with a country or in a country where 45% of the population is involved in cultivation, in agriculture, with majority of them being small and marginal, these DAMUs serve as a kind of a backbone supporting infrastructure for ensuring that the farmers, they are able to peacefully or in a very informed manner carry out cultivation and ensure rich dividends. Okay? Now, coming to certain articles relevant for your prelims, very shortly we will cover it in a very brief manner. So, India-UAE Inc. Pact for Civil Nuclear Cooperation. So, this is a pact which has been signed, and this is a pact which has been long time coming. It was announced way back in 2015 itself, when you had Prime Minister Modi's visit to UAE, where you had an agreement associated with the fact that India and UAE will cooperate in civil nuclear aspects and the aspects with regards to the utility of nuclear technology for various civilian sectors. So, it is a follow-up to that. But after that, you also had a trilateral meeting in 2022, trilateral meeting between India, France and UAE. That also talked about utilizing or finalizing a deal with regards to nuclear cooperation. Now, this has been carried out from the Indian side by NPCIL, that is Nuclear Power Cooperation of India. NPCIL from Indian side, and Emirates Nuclear Energy Cooperation, Emirates Nuclear Energy Cooperation on the side of UAE. They have finalized this. Okay. Now, this is basically a visit by the UAE delegates to India, where it has been finalized. Other than that, in this particular visit, there are other agreements also which have been signed with regards to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve and ADNOC, then setting up of food park in the region of Gujarat. So, there are multiple different agreements which have been signed. India-UAE relationship is very important when it comes to India and its policy in the Middle East and West Asia. And UAE and India, they are also a part of I2U2. That is a grouping of countries, that is India, Israel, US and UAE. So, we are members of I2U2 as well. So, that is why this relationship is very, very important. And given the fact that the Crown Prince was accorded with a very cordial welcome, so that is where India attributes or attaches prominence to this relationship. Okay. Now, 2 anti-submarine warfare vessels for the Indian Navy has been launched at the Cochin shipyard. Now, anti-submarine warfare ships, they have a unique characteristic that they need to have. They need to have the best category in terms of the sonar detection and also the radar capability, so that they can detect the underwater movements. And they have the torpedoes and so on, which can actually go and attack those submarines. So, you have 2 of these submarines being launched. Now, this is a series of multiple such anti-submarine warfare vessels being built by India, being built by the Cochin Shipyard Limited. Now, this basically is in the category of Mahe class ships. The 2 vessels launched by India, they are named INS Malpe and INS Mulki. The name is basically around the famous coastline in the Karnataka region. around the region of Udupi and Mangalore, you have these very famous beaches, that is Malpe and Mulki. So it is basically associated with that particular name. Now, this is a 900-ton displacement vessel. So it can, the prime purpose is the protection of the coastal waters. In the coastal waters, detecting any submarine movement, and this comes at a vital time when China is seeking to enlarge its submarine engagement, particularly in the region of the Bay of Bengal and also in the region of Arabian Sea. Okay. Now, this Mahe class ships, they will replace the existing Abhay class ships for the anti-submarine warfare. Now, then the last article, MSMEs face fresh headwinds on new machine safety norms. So basically, the government has come up with the Machinery and Electrical Equipment Safety Order 2024, and that has been issued by the Ministry of Heavy Industries. That basically talks about the minimum criteria of safety norms to be followed by the sector which is deploying certain machines, which is manufacturing or using certain machines. Now, this will impact the MSME sector because many of these MSME sectors or the industries in this MSME sector, they are operating under ISO 9001 guidelines. But that does not include safety norms, due to which industrial accidents are quite common in our country, due to which every other day you will read in the newspaper headlines that some or the other individuals, group of individuals, they experienced sad casualties because of lack of safety measures. Now, while that will improve the safety of the workers, that would bring welfare to the workers and better working conditions, but the MSMEs, they have a problem that the timeline given by the government to implement these new safety norms is the time of 1 year. So many of these MSMEs, they fear that in that 1 year, they will not be able to bring these newer machineries for better safety norms, and that will mean a loss of business, increase in the cost of input, and that would mean their profit would go down. So that is where they are urging the government in order to delay these safety norms. Again, starting from the first article, the lessons that we learned, that there will be pushback from the MSME sector. Yes, you can give the support system to the MSME sector that, okay, we can handhold you into that transition, but it has to be done. If not within 1 year, maybe 18 months. But safety is not a kind of a childish issue which can be taken for granted. So the way forward is that these safety norms should be brought about, maybe a hand-holding here or there, but it is important. Okay, that brings us to the end of the discussion for the day. In total, we have discussed various articles ranging from GS paper 1 to GS paper 3. I hope the discussion was helpful and you have added some amount of knowledge to your existing content. Do take up the quiz on our Telegram channel and just assess yourself about your level of understanding for these particular areas. Don't forget to click on the like, share and the subscribe button. And till we meet again, take care of yourself. Goodbye. Thank you.